Good morning, it's 11:39 and you're watching and listening to The Point with Inaya Falarin Iman and myself, Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio, as always.
Yes, and now an interesting story. Universities are seeking to, quote, decolonise the curriculum and liberate courses from the inequities of so-called white, Western and Eurocentric knowledge.
Yes, well, students at university this autumn may find that their modules will not be including the likes of Geoffrey Chaucer, Jane Austen or Shakespeare's sonnets. But is this really decolonising the curriculum and setting students up for a better future, or are we actually just censoring and erasing history?
Well, let's talk to academic and author Dr. Nikos Soterakopoulos. Should we decolonise the curriculum? In fact, before you even answer that question, isn't it quite patronising, first and foremost, this idea that these great works of literature, which is essentially form the basis of Western civilization, cannot be engaged with critically from ethnic minority students or poorer students? What is this all about?
You're right, Inaya, it's so patronizing. It's saying people that you cannot appreciate the best that culture has to offer, and therefore we have to give you something else which is not going to be so white European or whatever this means. So we need to ask two questions. The first question is, why do you want to remove Shakespeare? Is it because Shakespeare is not good? Is it because Shakespeare does not capture the tragedy or the brilliance of human life at its peak? If this is the case, then yes, I'm ready to discuss, quote, decolonizing the curriculum. But you will notice that most of the times they are not making an argument based on merit. They are not telling you that, let's say, Jane Austen is not good, but we want to bring someone which is better. They make an argument based on what is the identity of the author. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is racist. This is the definition of racist. You judge Shakespeare or whoever else, not based on what they have written, but based on their color of their skin or based on their identity. So we have to be very clear that not only this is patronizing towards students because it's denying them the best that the world of literature or of arts has to offer, but it also perpetuates the racism that supposedly it wants to remove. So we shouldn't say, well, it has some good intentions, but there are some bad parts. No, the intentions to begin with are to be questioned because I don't see them as good intentions.
Yeah, and it's almost a form of sort of soft cultural segregation because it's saying, well, if you're ethnic minority, you can only appreciate ethnic minority literature, and if you're white, then fine, you can appreciate white literature. It's very odd. There'll be people who say, including, I'm sure, people who are making these decisions, that what we're doing is exposing students to a wider array of intellects. You know, they'll say people are well aware of the works of Shakespeare, and actually what we're doing is broadening their understanding and knowledge of other, writers and intellects. What would you say to that?
Well, I would accept this if the order of this happening was starting from, oh, there is this author that is not included and we need to include that author, let's say from the developing world, and then we might see who we want to remove. But what you will notice is they start with who is to be removed. They start by saying we need to remove Shakespeare or Jane Austen, and then they try to figure out who to include. Let me tell you a very quick story from a diversifying curriculum meeting. We were in a former university where I used to work, and we thought we need to add non-European sociologists and ask a simple question. Who are these non-European sociologists we need to ask? Do you know them? And then people were on their phones Googling the non-European sociologists. They didn't know who they wanted to include. So they don't start by saying there are these good, great thinkers that we have excluded and we want to include them. They start by saying we have to exclude the classics because they're classics, because they're white Europeans or whatever. And then they make up stories about people who have been excluded. And again, there might be indeed the case that there are some very good thinkers or writers that have been excluded because we don't know enough about them. But then they need to, the people who want to diversify the curriculum, they need to make a case based on merit, not based on what is the identity of the author or even worse, the skin color of the author.
I think many of our viewers will agree with you, but what do you think about the actual effect this will have on students? Because a lot of the time, you know, we talk about this and it's like political correctness gone mad and all these types of things, and we're like, oh, these leaders of literature and the arts, they're just woke and all these types of phrases. But actually, this has a real effect on students. You know, they become disconnected to their historical inheritance, essentially. It reduces the richness of the courses that they are doing. They're not challenged, they're not criticised. It means that you create a generation of students that are insulated from offence, insulated from difficult and challenging and great ideas. What do you think about the actual effect this has on students?
Well, the actual effect is, first of all, it teaches them to think in the wrong way. It teaches them that the way we understand the world is not through our individual mind, but it's through the chromosomes or the color of our skin. So it already sets them for failure. But also, it denies to them the best that the world has to offer. Literature is not just something which is sterile and dry. Literature should inspire. Literature should tell you this is what human experience can be. This is what, think about Shakespeare, think about Romeo and Juliet, the richness of emotions, the power of love, the tragedy of unrequited love. Why should students be denied these things in the name of this ideology which tells them you are not clever enough to understand Shakespeare and we're going to give you something inferior because we don't consider you that you will be able to understand Shakespeare? So we're setting up students for failure and we're denying them the immense pleasure of great literature, which can come from men, from women, from people from all over the world. But again, the point is we should be able to judge. Is this a good piece of art? Is this a good piece of work? Not who wrote it and what is their identity or their chromosome or their DNA.